Dr. Mannix is a palliative care consultant who's helped thousands of people at the very end of their lives. And she has seen the harm done by the taboo of death by not talking about it. And she's on a mission to reclaim public understanding of dying. And to do this, she has written what I think is one of the most moving and powerful books that I've ever read, with the end in mind, in which she tells the stories of some of her patients and their families. She says she's retired, but she seems to me busier than ever, giving talks and interviews, and she's helping people all over the world to be less afraid of dying by talking about it. So, Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. So lovely to meet you all. I know that we're never going to be best buddies with death, but I wanted to talk briefly about how knowing more can help us to be less frightened. And my slides are not advancing, despite having, oh, here we go. So let's think about why we should talk about dying. Well, why do we avoid it? People don't like us to talk about it, do they? They say, can't we change the subject, talk about something nicer, do it later? And because we don't talk about it, it suggests that it's terrible, that it's scary, that it's too awful for us to talk about. And yet we know that for anything that's scary, the more we understand about it, the less there is to be fearful about. And the more confident we feel, the more we look confident, we move confident, we speak confident, and that makes everybody around us feel more confident as well. We also know that complicated things need a lot of thinking about. We do a lot of preparation before we go away on holiday, before we take somebody for the first time to dentists. So this is a complicated thing. It needs some thinking about in advance, and that helps us to be able to deal with it when it's happening. So thinking about where to start, well, we start where we always start. Human beings tell each other stories. We all do that. And so it might be that we're using stories in books, or it might be things that come up on the news. It might be that we've got a relative or a friend, or there's a pop star who's poorly or who dies, or it might be somebody's pet. We know that talking about dying won't make it happen, just as talking about winning the lottery still hasn't made me win the lottery. It's completely safe to talk about dying. Sometimes a person might get a new diagnosis or have a medical problem, and that makes it even more important to start to think about these things. And when we do that, it's important to keep a record of that conversation so that if somebody else is going to come and pick up the conversation, they know the words that we used and how the person that we were talking to understood it and the words that they used. So for that person, it might be that you're going to use a little notebook. It might be that you use one of the brilliant books beyond words that all three of us are going to say great things about today. And for carers, and whether you're a lay person of family or whether you're a professional, write it down so that anybody else who needs to pick up from you can do that. I'm going to show you just some extracts from the books beyond words that are about dying, and there are some new books now that are about COVID as well. But you can see these beautiful illustrations. The words in these books are the words that come out of your mouth as you have a conversation about the pictures. And when you've had those conversations, you can make notes in the book if you want to, so the next person who has that conversation with the person with learning disability knows what you talked about last time and can use the same sorts of words. And what we need to be talking about to be ready for dying is about what really matters to an individual person. And we know that that might be people, or we just met Alfie, Gavin's lovely dog. It might be the place that people live, or it might be the things around them that just make them feel safe and able to deal with difficult things. Some people like to have their own space for peace and quiet. Some people like to have their own space to have company and fun. And we don't need to be talking about dying to understand what the things are that are important to people. We can talk about holidays. When I go away from home, what do I like to have with me that makes me feel safe and secure? We can talk about going for an overnight stay somewhere. If I was going to go and visit somebody in my family or somebody I was very excited to see, but it's too far away to get home the same day, what would I take with me to make me feel safe and secure while I was away overnight? And then we can start to talk about, say I had to be in hospital rather than on holiday. Would it be those same things? Would there be anything extra? And how do I stay in touch with people? Hasn't this been important during COVID? So how do we stay in touch? Is it by telephone? Is it by mobile phone? If this is somebody who uses one of the sign languages, then video messaging is a really important thing for them. Maybe it's somebody who uses text messages or who has an assistant who provides text messaging for them. Really important to be able to contact people when they're not nearby. I want to say briefly what to expect when somebody's dying, because there's a great mystery around it. And when you see it on television, it's always extremely extreme, and it's exciting and it's terrifying, and it's just not like that at all. As we're dying, generally what happens is we get more tired and we need regular naps. So carers need to encourage napping and explain to friends and family that napping is important. And then with the little bit of energy that people have between their naps, let's use that for the thing that's most helpful or most enjoyable, rather than insisting on the usual rules like walking to the dining room. Maybe you can get wheeled to the dining room, give us a break, and then you can enjoy eating your meal instead. People may have less appetite, and maybe what we need to do is stop trying to insist on big meals and just offer tiny tastes of the things they really love. Of course, if they lose appetite altogether, we need to check that they're not feeling nauseated. And I know Professor Ilora is going to say something about that in a moment. As time goes by, people change from being sleepy to actually being unconscious, with periods of being awake. But this now means that we can't wake them up when it's medicine time. And of course, if they've got symptoms from their illness, breathlessness, itch, nausea, pain, think of the symptoms we might get from illnesses, we need to make sure that those symptoms don't come back if they're not awake enough to take their medicines. So we might need now to start to use a different way of giving those medicines. We need to explain this pattern of changing awakeness and being unconscious to family and friends so they don't worry that something wrong is happening. This is the normal pattern. This is safe and right. But we all know that we've had that experience of being awake first thing in the morning and we're not quite awake yet, and we feel a little bit muddled about what happened in the dream and what's happening in real life. That can happen now as well, and people can be a little bit muddled, and we might need to help them to recognize who we are. So just shouting it's me, doesn't really help. We do have to say, hello, it's Dr. Kathryn, and take my mask down for a moment so you can see my face and put it back up again. Oh, hello, it's Mum. Remember how much expression we can get into our eyes when we're talking to people. We need to look for signs of people being distressed, but we also need to look for signs of people being contented. And this is really important. We want people to feel contented. And we need to pass on what contentment looks like to other carers who might be new to this very important patient that they're looking after. So, for example, I have friends with learning disability who, when they're distressed, they rock. But I also have a friend with a learning disability who, when she's happy, she rocks and she sings to herself. So it's really important that people know that rocking is a distress sign for some people, but it's a contentment sign for somebody else. So for this person, how do we know when they're contented is a really important part of the message for people who are looking after them. We move on from being unconscious some of the time to being unconscious all of the time. The person doesn't know they're becoming unconscious. It doesn't cause them to be frightened. Once we're completely unconscious, our breathing starts to change and it becomes just reflex breathing patterns. We don't know we're doing it, but sometimes the breathing is fast and then it becomes slow and then fast again. Sometimes it's deep and then it's shallow and then it's deep again. Sometimes it's pretty noisy and snory, and it's important to explain to families that this is okay, this is all normal, and it doesn't mean that the person is distressed. Everything's starting to shut down in this person's body. Their blood pressure isn't as high, and so their body starts to be a little bit cooler, their skin might be paler, cool to touch, their fingernails and toenails may go a little bit dusky, they might get a little bit restless, and we need to check that that doesn't mean they're uncomfortable. And deeply unconscious people are very relaxed. Their face muscles relax. All those wrinkles start to fall away. We look younger when we're unconscious, surprisingly, but our mouth might flop open. So if somebody's mouth, they're lying with their mouth open, their friends might think that's a bit peculiar and that needs to be explained. The person's just very deeply relaxed. And then during one of these periods of slow breathing, there'll be a breath out that just doesn't have another breath afterwards. That last breath isn't special, it isn't difficult, it isn't panicky, it's very, very gentle. And it's fine for carers to encourage family and friends to sit with a dying person and to continue to sit with them after they've died, always explaining as we're caring what's going on. We need to keep talking. There's some evidence that unconscious people can still hear us, so let's make sure they hear the voices of people that they love and the sounds that they enjoy, maybe their favourite music. For carers, let's explain what's happening as we're giving the care. Tell people what to expect next in this process and keep checking, keep asking. Remember those things that were important, what matters most to the person that we talked about at the beginning. Now this really matters. If the cat needs to be in the room, find the cat. We all know the cat will decide whether it's going to be in the room or not, right? But these are important things. Is the right music playing? Is the person in the right place? Are the right people around them? Families don't know what to do, so give them jobs that help them stay connected. Maybe they can help the person not to have very dry lips by rubbing lip salve in, or using something to help their mouth not to get too dry if they're breathing through their mouth, or rubbing cream into their arms and legs to help them feel loved and cared for, or making teas and coffees and keeping everybody with enough drinks going on. We're checking all the time for the person's comfort, for their level of awareness, and if they need communication aids, we have to really bear those in mind. Deaf people need to wear their hearing aids while they're dying, or they can't hear the reassurance of our voices. But we need to remember when we're lying them on their side, not to take the hearing aid out so that it doesn't press in from the pillow. So these aren't complicated medical things. This is care that can happen at home. Now, they may very well need little bits of medical care, but dying itself doesn't cause complicated symptoms. It only causes tiredness and unconsciousness and automatic breathing. The symptoms a person has are from either the illness that they have or just because they're not moving about. They're lying still in bed all the time and their joints get a bit stiff and creaky. So we need a plan for managing any symptoms, and your district nurse or your general practitioner or a palliative care team, they'll all help with this. And it might mean storing drugs and equipment and things somewhere that's really safe in the place where the person lives. And the plan needs to tell us what to do. If this person gets a symptom, what should our action be? When should we send for help? Who should we ask for help? And also instructions in the plan in case you need to call somebody out of hours who doesn't know this person as a patient, who needs to know what they like to be called, how they like to be spoken to, what sorts of language they like to use, and what matters to them. So that for a person who really doesn't want to go to hospital, people who come in to help understand that. So I'm about to finish. I want to just get a message across that dying is just a normal part of living. And although it might make us sad, it needn't make us frightened. People with learning disabilities, they just die the same as anybody else is dying. And it's something we can talk about. It's a process we can recognise. It's something we can get ready for. And that means that mostly we can help people to be cared for in surroundings that they know with the right people around them. Or if they do need to go to hospital, we know what are the things that they need to have around them to keep them feeling secure.